The pristine, turquoise waters of the Seychelles have long been a symbol of unspoiled paradise, a place where the world's worries dissolve under the gentle caress of the Indian Ocean sun. For the ultra-wealthy and those seeking absolute privacy, the Amanpuri resort represents the pinnacle of this escape, a sanctuary of thatched-roof villas perched over crystalline lagoons, where the only sounds are the lapping of waves and the whisper of the trade winds. It was into this idyllic seclusion that Chloe Bennett and Xander Volkov arrived, the picture of a golden couple embarking on what should have been the happiest chapter of their lives. Yet, within the confines of their exclusive Villa 7, a nightmare was unfolding, a meticulously planned tragedy that would transform a symbol of luxury into a sealed tomb. When anxious staff finally breached the villa's silence after a day of unnerving stillness, they discovered a scene of such brutal violence it seemed to defy the very essence of the surrounding beauty. The elegant interior was in chaos, and amidst the disarray lay Chloe, her life brutally extinguished. Her husband, Xander, was found on the private deck, not weeping or frantic, but composed, his gaze fixed on the horizon as if contemplating a complex problem. His explanation was delivered with a steady, almost rehearsed calm. "It was a terrible accident," he claimed. "She fell." But the dark stains on the marble, the shattered glass, and the profound, unsettling quiet of the man himself told a different, far more sinister story, a story of a predator operating under the most impenetrable of disguises, a man trained by the Central Intelligence Agency not just in the art of deception, but in the science of death. Before we dive deeper into this chilling case, I want to take a moment to say something important. This channel just crossed 100 subscribers, and I can't thank you enough. Every single one of you, from Tulsa, Oklahoma to Dubai, London, and Sydney, is helping this community grow into a global voice for truth and awareness. Your support means everything. Let's keep pushing forward, telling the stories that others are too afraid to tell. Now, back to the case, and to the truth that still echoes across the paradise of the Seychelles. To truly grasp the profound tragedy of Chloe Bennett's death, one must peel back the layers of the perfect life she believed she was building, an illusion constructed with the precision of a military campaign. Their story began not on a sun-drenched beach, but in the rarefied air of a high-society charity auction in a glittering Manhattan ballroom. Chloe, at 32, was the epitome of self-made success. An architectural prodigy, she had parlayed a visionary thesis and relentless drive into a thriving firm known for its sustainable and human-centric designs. She was beloved by her friends for her wry humor and fierce loyalty, and respected in her field for a brilliance that was both intellectual and deeply empathetic. Yet, beneath this accomplished exterior lay a profound vulnerability. A year prior, a single phone call had shattered her world. Both of her parents, renowned cardiologists, had been killed when their private plane went down in a storm over the Adirondacks. The loss was catastrophic, leaving Chloe adrift in a grief that was both personal and professional, as she now found herself the sole heir to a complex estate and a fortune valued at over $15 million. It was this specific combination of success, warmth, and profound vulnerability that made her a perfect target. Xander Volkov was, in every sense, a ghost. His official title, Senior Risk Assessment Consultant, for a Washington, D.C. think tank, was a masterfully bland cover story designed to elicit no further questions. In reality, he was a 12-year veteran of the CIA's Directorate of Operations, a paramilitary case officer whose career was a tapestry of deniable actions in the world's gray zones. Colleagues, the few who knew him, described a man of formidable intellect and chilling pragmatism, capable of profound emotional detachment, a necessary trait for a profession that required building intimate trust only to weaponize it. The charity gala was no chance encounter. Through financial reconnaissance and psychological profiling, Xander had identified Chloe months before. He had studied her philanthropic interests, her work schedule, her favorite restaurants, and the contours of her grief. When he finally approached her, he was a perfectly crafted fantasy, a phantom tailored to her deepest needs. He was worldly yet attentive, powerful yet vulnerable, sharing just enough about the sensitive nature of his work to make her feel uniquely trusted, while revealing nothing of substance. He was a master angler, and he had just cast his line with impeccable timing. The courtship that followed was a textbook case of love bombing, a psychological operation executed with the discipline and resources of a nation-state. He overwhelmed Chloe's grieving heart and logical mind with a relentless, intoxicating campaign of romance. There were private helicopter rides over the Manhattan skyline at sunset, surprise weekend trips to a secluded chateau in the south of France where he had seemingly arranged for every detail to be perfect, and lavish, thoughtful gifts that appeared not as ostentatious displays of wealth, but as proof of his deep understanding of her tastes. He mirrored her desires, echoing her dreams of a family, her passion for architecture, her wish to make a difference in the world. He was, in every way, the man she had always hoped to find. Within weeks, he had a key to her Tribeca apartment. Within 2 months, he was effectively living there, and the systematic isolation of Chloe Bennett began in earnest. Her best friend, Maya, a sharp and skeptical investigative journalist, watched with growing alarm as their weekly dinners were first postponed, then cancelled, always supplanted by a surprise from Xander, front-row tickets to a Broadway show, a last-minute trip to the Hamptons. When Maya voiced her concerns, Xander would subtly undermine her, suggesting to Chloe that her friend was perhaps jealous of their happiness or simply couldn't understand the pressures of his important work. Chloe, desperate to believe in the fairy tale, slowly stopped confiding in her. It was, as Maya would later describe, like watching someone being digitally erased, bite by bite. Her younger sister, Emma, noticed more tangible, physical signs. Chloe, who had always been graceful, was suddenly clumsy. A faint, yellowish bruise on her upper arm was explained as a mishap with a kitchen cabinet. A slight limp was blamed on a misstep during a morning run. During a family dinner, Emma saw the way Xander's eyes, usually so warm and engaging, flashed with a terrifying, flat coldness when Chloe casually contradicted a minor point he was making. The look was so brief, so fleeting, that Chloe missed it entirely, but it chilled Emma to her core. "I told her I was worried," Emma recalled, her voice thick with regret. "I begged her to just slow down. But she just said, 'Emma, he's under a lot of pressure. You don't understand his world.' She was already in his world, and it was a fortress with the walls closing in." The manipulation escalated with dizzying speed. Just 3 months into their relationship, Xander proposed during a private dinner on a chartered yacht on Lake Michigan, the Chicago skyline glittering behind them. The ring was a flawless, emerald-cut diamond of staggering size and clarity. The setting was a scene from a film, and Chloe, still raw with grief and intoxicated by the relentless attention, said yes. It was then that the final stage of the financial entrapment began. Using psychological tactics refined in the interrogation rooms and agent recruitment meetings of his professional life, Xander began to speak incessantly of their future and building a legacy together. He logically, persuasively, suggested that merging their finances was the most efficient way to plan for their life, particularly for the monumental Virginia horse country estate he claimed was their shared dream. He presented it as a partnership, a symbol of their unity. One evening, he just happened to have the joint account paperwork in his briefcase. Under his gentle, unwavering pressure, a pressure that felt like love, Chloe signed. With a few strokes of a pen, Alexander Volkov gained operational control over more than $8 million of Chloe Bennett's inheritance. The lavish, destination wedding in Lake Como was, to all appearances, funded by Xander's generosity. The truth, discovered later, was far darker. It was paid for with a series of high-interest loans taken out in their new joint names, secretly plunging them into massive debt. As they boarded their first-class flight to the Seychelles, Chloe texted her sister a final, happy message. "Off to paradise with the love of my life. So happy." She had no idea she was flying directly into an operational trap, seated beside her charming, calculated executioner. The Amapuri Resort, a chain of pristine islands fringed with powdery white sand, was the final, perfect setting for Xander's endgame. Villa 7. The most secluded and expensive on the property, offered the absolute privacy he required. It was not a honeymoon suite, it was a killing box. From the moment they arrived, the resort's highly trained staff, attuned to the subtlest needs of their clientele, noticed dissonant notes. Xander consistently ordered for Chloe without consulting her, his tone pleasant but leaving no room for discussion. He held her wrist, not her hand, when they walked to dinner, his grip just a little too firm, a little too possessive. A spa therapist, during a couple's massage, noted faint, fingerprint-shaped bruises on Chloe's upper arms and, following protocol, discreetly documented it in a confidential staff log. The activities coordinator found it odd that Xander abruptly canceled Chloe's scheduled solo spa treatment, claiming she had a migraine, even as Chloe stood beside him looking perfectly healthy, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. The villa was becoming a gilded cage. The point of no return, the moment the operation was irrevocably compromised, came on the fourth day. Xander was scheduled for a deep-sea fishing excursion, a deliberately chosen solo activity that would provide him with a public alibi and leave Chloe completely alone for hours. It was during this window of solitude that Chloe, perhaps driven by a finally irrepressible gut feeling, decided to investigate his secure satellite laptop. A bulky, hardened device he treated with a level of care that went beyond normal professional concern. He had left it plugged in on the desk, a rare moment of carelessness. With a trembling hand she opened it. She tried obvious passwords, their wedding date, his birthday, with no success. Then, remembering a story he told her in a moment of feigned, tender vulnerability, she typed in the name of his childhood dog. The screen unlocked. What unfolded before her was not merely the discovery of an affair, it was the declassification of her own life as a targeted operation. She found 3 separate, fully active, and intensely intimate relationships with women in London, Hong Kong, and Dubai. The messages were not casual, they were detailed, passionate, and dated right up to the day of their wedding. In each relationship, he had a slightly different name, a slightly different cover story, a slightly different persona tailored to his target. He was a master of identities, a man who did not have a single true self. But the true, soul-crushing horror was buried in a hidden, encrypted partition, protected by a level of security that spoke of state secrets. Here, she found his real CIA personnel file, revealing not just his true identity, but his extensive training in close-quarters combat, industrial sabotage, and terminal persuasion, the agency's cold euphemism for assassination. She found scanned bank documents showing he had already wire-transferred over $2.5 million of her money to a numbered account in the Cayman Islands. And most chillingly, she found his search history from the weeks leading up to their wedding. Toxicity of local Seychelles marine life, undetectable neurotoxins and autopsy detection, post-mortem lividity and saltwater drowning, creating accidental fall scenarios, and pressure points for inducing coma. Chloe Bennett was finally, terrifyingly awake. She was not on her honeymoon. She was a non-compliant asset in a deniable area, and the pre-approved contingency plan was her permanent erasure. That evening, with a courage born of sheer terror and furious betrayal, Chloe moved their private, in-villa dinner to the resort's main, open-air restaurant, a space teeming with potential witnesses. She needed a crowd, a buffer against the isolation of Villa 7. When Xander arrived, smiling his perfect, charming smile, she was already seated, his satellite phone placed conspicuously in the center of the table like a centerpiece of doom. Her face was pale, but her voice was low and steady, a controlled detonation. "Jenna in London sends her love," she began, watching his smile freeze. "So does Lihua in Hong Kong. Should I be worried about Amara in Dubai, or is she just work?" The transformation was instantaneous. The mask of the loving husband didn't just slip, it vaporized, replaced by the flat, assessing eyes of an operator whose cover had been blown. He tried to lie, to gaslight her, to tell her she was being paranoid, that it was all a misunderstanding related to his work. But Chloe was armed with the truth. She systematically revealed everything she knew: the stolen money, the multiple identities, the other women, his true profession. And then she delivered the line that signed her death warrant. "When we get back," she said, her voice rising, drawing glances from nearby tables, "I'm going to the Inspector General. I'm going to the Washington Post. I am going to burn your entire world to the ground." For a CIA officer, this was not a marital threat, it was the ultimate compromise. Exposure meant not just the end of his career, but potential prosecution, imprisonment, and a catastrophic breach of operational security. The asset had become a direct, existential threat. Neutralization was the only remaining protocol. He reached under the table, his hand clamping around her wrist with a force that made her gasp. "You have no idea what you're playing with," he whispered, the sound like dry ice. "You will be silent, or you will disappear." Chloe wrenched her hand away and stood up, her chair scraping loudly. "Go to hell, Xander." "Or should I call you Alexei?" she said, before turning and walking quickly back straight, towards the isolated Villa 7. Xander did not follow immediately. He sat for a moment, finishing his glass of wine with a steady hand, his face a placid mask. Then he stood and followed. A couple from South Africa at a nearby table would later tell police that the look on his face as he left was one of utter, terrifying purpose. They were the last people, aside from her killer, to see Chloe Bennett alive. What transpired within the soundproof luxury of Villa 7 between 9:15 p.m. and 3 a.m. was a horror story written not in passion, but in the cold, clinical language of forensic pathology. It was a prolonged, systematic, and brutal assault. The argument began the moment Xander entered the villa. It escalated with terrifying speed. At 9:47 p.m., a noise complaint was logged from the neighboring villa. Resort security called the room. Xander answered, his voice calm, slightly embarrassed, and utterly convincing. "So sorry, we were watching an action film far too loud. It won't happen again." He had, in an instant, switched back to his charming persona, a testament to his profound compartmentalization. But after that call, the real violence began. Blood spatter analysis later conducted by French forensic experts would paint a vivid and horrifying picture. The initial attack occurred near the living room sofa. Xander likely backhanded Chloe across the face, the heavy signet ring he always wore splitting her lip. She fought back ferociously. Skin and blood later found under her fingernails would yield his DNA. She tried to flee towards the bedroom, perhaps to barricade herself in the bathroom or reach the landline phone. He caught her. The primary weapon was a heavy, solid bronze tribal statue, an object of art that became an instrument of death. The first blow to the back of her head was concussive, dazing her. The subsequent blows, to her face, her arms as she raised them in a futile defense, her ribs, were delivered with controlled, brutal force. The medical examiner would testify that the pattern of injuries suggested a pause, a moment where the assailant stopped, only to resume the assault with renewed focus. This was not a blind rage, it was disciplined, punitive violence, an interrogation that required no answers. At 11:02 p.m., in a final, desperate surge of self-preservation, Chloe managed to break away and lock herself in the bathroom. She grabbed the landline phone and managed to dial the front desk. The resort's call log shows a connection that lasted for interminable seconds. The operator heard a woman's voice. Choked, desperate, and gurgling, gasp a single, fragmented word. "Help!" Before the line went dead with a sound of splintering wood. Xander had kicked the door in. What followed was the final, fatal struggle in the opulent marble bathroom. It was here that the killing blow was delivered, a massive, crushing force to her temple from the bronze statue. Chloe Bennett's world, once so full of light and promise, went dark forever. And this is when Alexander Volkov, the bereaved husband, vanished completely, and the CIA cleanup operative went to work. The grieving fiancé was a discarded persona. What followed was a methodical, multi-phase operational sequence. From 11:15 p.m. to 1:30 a.m., he entered the cleanup phase. He showered, using strong resort soap and a loofah to meticulously scrub every trace of Chloe's blood and his own sweat from his body and under his fingernails. He then bagged his bloody clothes, the murder weapon, her laptop, and her phone into a weighted dive bag. He attempted to clean the crime scene with resort towels, a futile effort against the luminol and DNA analysis that would come, but a delaying tactic nonetheless. From 1:30 a.m. to 3:17 a.m., he moved to the staging phase. He rearranged furniture, overturning a small table and shattering a vase to support a narrative of a frantic, accidental fall. He moved Chloe's lifeless body to the bathroom, positioning her near the bathtub and partially dressing her in a nightgown to create the illusion that she had slipped and struck her head. At 3:17 a.m., he moved to disposal. A security camera at the far end of the dock, its presence likely unknown to him, captured a dark figure, his height and build, walking calmly to the very end of the pier and heaving a heavy, bulky bag into the deep, dark channel where the currents were strongest. This was the final act of erasure, the jettisoning of the physical evidence. Then, he waited. He slept. At 7:42 a.m., well-rested and psychologically prepared, he initiated the performance. His voice, when he called the front desk, was a masterpiece of modulated panic and grief. "My wife!" he gasped, the sound catching perfectly in his throat. "There's been a terrible accident. Please help." It was the performance of a lifetime. Initially, his story held a superficial plausibility. The local Seychelles police, more accustomed to petty theft and drunk tourists, were inclined to believe the tragic tale of the wealthy American. But the resort's manager, a former officer with the French gendarmerie, felt a deep, professional unease. The blood spatter patterns were all wrong for a simple fall. They were classic high-velocity impact spatter. The grieving husband's demeanor was off. His grief seemed performative, his answers too precise, his emotional effects strangely flat. The breakthrough, when it came, was from a confluence of sources. The South African couple from the restaurant came forward, providing a damning account of the confrontation and Xander's threatening demeanor. The resort's IT department, at the manager's insistence, performed a deep-level recovery of the villa's internet router logs, unearthing the deleted searches for neurotoxins and drowning. But the most critical piece of evidence came from an unexpected source, a hidden nanny cam in the neighboring villa, placed by a paranoid family with a newborn, had been accidentally left on. Its audio recording was crystal clear. It captured the sounds of the initial argument, a sharp cry of pain from Chloe, and then Xander's voice, cold and clear as a bell, stating, "You should have kept your mouth shut. You've left me no choice." Faced with this, The Seychelles government invoked international protocols, bringing in Interpol, who immediately looped in the U.S. State Department and the CIA. The revelation that the suspect was an active CIA officer created a diplomatic and legal firestorm. The agency, initially closing ranks, performed its own damage assessment and quickly determined that Xander was a liability who could not be protected. They cut him loose, providing discreet but devastating intelligence about his past, including buried complaints from 2 previous relationships that had been quietly handled internally. His defense: that it was a crime of passion, provoked by a volatile argument, was systematically dismantled by the prosecution, who framed his actions as a premeditated assassination, carried out by a trained government operative who saw his wife as a hostile asset to be neutralized. The trial was a global media spectacle. In a packed courtroom, Chloe's sister, Emma, delivered a victim impact statement that silenced the room and left hardened journalists in tears. "He didn't just kill my sister," she said, her voice trembling not with weakness, but with raw, powerful emotion. "He murdered Chloe Bennett, the brilliant architect, the loving daughter, the loyal friend. He replaced her with a story, a sensational headline about a dead honeymooner. He thought he could just erase her. But we remember. We remember her laugh, her genius, her kindness. And we will never, ever let the world forget who she really was." Xander Volkov was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in a maximum security prison with no possibility of parole. Throughout the sentencing, he showed no remorse, no flicker of emotion. Just the cold, empty stare of a man whose most critical mission had ended in catastrophic failure, a ghost finally captured and caged. The story of Chloe and Xander is a haunting, enduring lesson in the architecture of modern evil. It forces us to confront the terrifying reality that the capacity for profound, pathological deception can be not just innate, but professionally trained, officially sanctioned, and hidden behind the most impenetrable veil of authority and trust. It is a stark reminder that the most dangerous monsters are not those that lurk in the shadows of society, but those who stand confidently in the light. Armed with our implicit faith and their own state-sponsored impunity. Chloe Bennett's story is more than a true crime case, it is a permanent warning, a solemn plea for vigilance in a world where the lines between protector and predator, between hero and assassin, can be deliberately, expertly, and fatally erased. Her memory stands as a testament to the courage it takes to uncover the truth, and a chilling promise that some paradises are only an illusion, masking a darkness as deep as the ocean that surrounds them.